Everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down the Thursday Night Football showdown slate between the New Orleans Saints and the Dallas Cowboys, which should be a pretty interesting game. There's lots of news to follow on who's going to be in and who's going to be out. We also have the great Swiss Army knife of Taysom Hill starting at quarterback. I'm sure we're all big Taysom Hill fans after all the time he's vultured Alvin Kamara and whoever else's touchdowns the past couple of seasons. But we get to watch him play tonight. They pay him enough money, so might as well give him a shot. Seems like he's healthy enough to play now. But if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you would like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, you're an official member over on Patreon. Lots of extra content over there. Link can be found down below. Projections, cheat sheets, optimizer, ownership projections. It's what I use to put 150 lineups each and every single showdown slate. And I'm just covering the NFL, NBA, MLB, and NASCAR once the seasons start back up again. So if you want to check it out, link can be found down below. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know this by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 mass contests, or salary cap restrictions or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're new signing over on PrizePicks, you get a free money bonus as an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. It's also the beginning of the month, so it is the best time to sign up over on Patreon if you do want to check that out. I forgot to mention. I think that'd be it for the plugs for the most part, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position, and both these guys are pretty much the best plays in the entire slate. We'll start up top with Dak Prescott, very expensive at $12,000, but I think we can find that value to make him fit. I will say the question is not if you want to play Dak Prescott or not. Like, I'll keep it simple. We don't have to break down Dak Prescott. You're going to want to play Dak on this slate. It's just a matter of how much do you want to captain him compared to how much do you want to flex him. Personally, for me, since he's not really a rushing quarterback, yeah, I can get that rushing touchdown here and there, but Taysom Hill is more of a rushing quarterback than Dak Prescott's going to be. And I'd be more inclined to captain Taysom Hill on this slate than I would Dak Prescott. Because as I always say, like these statue quarterbacks, I'm not saying Dak Prescott's not athletic. I'm just saying he doesn't really run the ball too much during the game. Yes, rushing touchdowns can happen from him, but he's not going to get him out there, get like 50, 60 yards on the ground, unlike a guy like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or potentially Taysom Hill. In rushing quarterbacks, I tend to roster more in the captain spot just because they're kind of a bit of a, I don't know, they break the rules of fantasy football, really. So Dak Prescott, again, I love in the flex spot tonight. I will captain him maybe like 10 to 15%, but I'm probably not going to go any higher than that because if Dak has a great game, I'd say it's more likely that a guy like CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper, assuming he plays, sounds like he's going to, we don't know that yet, is in the optimal captain spot. Meanwhile, Dak is in the flex spot. But I do like Dak here. I mean, the Saints, they're not a bad defense. They're very good versus the run, but versus the pass, they do struggle a little bit more. 13th DVOA and 14th versus quarterbacks, allowing nearly 300 passing yards per game. But I do like Dak Prescott quite a bit here. I mean, excellent pass catching options, and obviously the running backs out of the backfield, Zeke or Tony Pollard, whoever it may be, and Dalton Schultz are fine options as well. And he's averaging around 300 passing yards per game. So no reason really not to like Dak here besides the price point, but it's a showdown slate, so you're going to have to find a way to get Dak because I'd say there's a strong chance he's one of the highest scoring players on the slate. Then Taysom Hill, he is pretty cheap for a starting quarterback, especially one that can run the ball quite a bit. Dallas this season has been pretty stout DVOA-wise versus the past, but fantasy point-wise, they are giving him some pretty big games to quarterbacks. 4th DVOA, but 20th versus quarterbacks having 270 passing yards per game. It's really just the rushing upside for me with Taysom Hill. We can't really look at any of his numbers this season because it hasn't really just played. He also hasn't been a starting quarterback yet. Jameis Winston, Trevor Siemian have gotten those opportunities first, but we've seen in the past Taysom Hill run the ball quite a bit around the goal line. If Alvin Kamara is out, I think that might help him in a weird way where he just doesn't really have to get the ball off to Alvin Kamara. Obviously, Mark Ingram will just kind of slide right into that role, but we'll see who plays or not. I have no idea who's going to play. Alvin Kamara might be in, might be out, but we know Taysom Hill is going to run the ball quite a bit. Hopefully like 8, 10 plus times, I'd be fine with that. If you can get a rushing touchdown, get a passing touchdown, might not be the prettiest thing through the air, but $9,600, I'm willing to take some shots there, and I have a lot of interest in Taysom Hill. Currently, I have him projected as the highest owned player in the entire slate just because of the pricing discrepancy between him and Dak Prescott, but they'll be probably the 2 highest owned players, and I will have a decent amount of Taysom Hill in the captain spot just because of that rushing upside. Moving over to our lineup, and like I said, guys, I never make these for you guys to use. I'm just trying to see what fits as we talk through it. I'm not putting too much time into it, just building this on the fly. Like I said, I do like captain Taysom Hill just because of the rushing upside, but I'm actually going to just flex both these guys for now. I'll probably end up getting a guy like Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb in the captain spot just because I feel like that's probably the best way to go. But so I'll plug in Taysom Hill and flex, and then we'll put in Dak Prescott. Very expensive, but we'll have to find a way to make it work. We're left with around $7,000 left for the last 4 spots. Back to a captain. Probably have to get some cheap plays like a kicker, but we can make it work. Moving on to the running backs. We're going to start with the Cowboys first, which is just a two-man show between Ezekiel Elliott at nearly $11,000 and Tony Pollard at nearly $8,000. And I will say the matchup for both of these guys is absolutely brutal. The Saints are first team versus the run and allowing the fewest points per game at the running back position, only 65 rushing yards per game, less than half a rushing touchdown, and only 4 catches and 42 receiving yards. So even if Zeke was getting a full workload here, $11,000 is just a very tough price point to get to, especially in just such a stout defense. Looking at snaps last week, Ezekiel Elliott played around 67% of the snaps, Tony Pollard just over 40. But the big thing here to talk about is the fact that the news has been throughout the week that they're going to limit Ezekiel Elliott's touches because of the knee discomfort that he's been having. But then yesterday, Jerry Jones, which you got to be careful with Jerry Jones because we know he can say just about anything he wants. But he said that he expects Ezekiel Elliott to have a big load. So we'll see. I don't know. It's hard to dissect this. I mean, it would make sense to get Tony Pollard more touches because honestly, he's the better running back. They're just paying Zeke a bunch of money, so they got to give him the ball just to justify the money that they gave him. But both these guys are definitely viable plays. But if Zeke Elliott's going to be limited in any way at nearly $11,000 versus the best run defense so far this season in the NFL, he's going to have to score some touchdowns because I don't think he's going to get like 100+ yards on the ground. I don't think he's going to catch 6-7 balls. So it's going to be really hard to play either of these running backs. Like if I'm building 150 lineups, yeah, I'm getting exposure to the Cowboys running backs because they typically do have pretty good DFS days despite the matchups. But hopefully we get maybe a clear indication of what the workload is going to look like for these two guys heading into the game. We know both these guys can be viable in the same slate. That is certainly possible. Both these guys are very solid running backs. I just personally think Tony Pollard's a better running back. So he just gets more touches because they paid the man, and you got to justify that. But we'll have to wait and see. Zeke's just very expensive, though. I think he's still playable. And if Jared Jones is right and he gets a huge load, I mean, if he can get us 20+ touches, I mean, he'll certainly be viable on a showdown slate. But as of right now, it is kind of confusing on what to do with that situation. And the Saints backfield is a little bit easier to break down because it's pretty simple. I'll give you some scenarios here. Alvin Kamara is out. Mark Ingram is good to go. He is the clear-cut RB1 in this offense. He's going to get all the touches, and he should play with confidence. Only $5,000. Dallas isn't as good versus the run as the Saints are. Not even close. I think you could definitely play Mark Ingram at $5,000. It'd probably be arguably like the best play on the slate point, but otherwise, I think he'd be popular in the captain spot. Play Mark Ingram if Alvin Kamara is out. If Alvin Kamara is in, kind of a weird situation. I'm not sure exactly how much Taysom Hill will dump the ball off to Alvin Kamara. I'm not sure exactly how healthy Alvin Kamara will be. He's very expensive. You should play him in some formats, but I don't think he'll be like a optimal play on the side. I'd rather get exposure to the Dallas passing attack, guys like CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper, than I would spending top dollar for Alvin Kamara here. And if Alvin Kamara's in, and obviously Mark Ingram's in, don't even think about playing Tony Jones. Tony Jones sucks. I think we all played him on Thanksgiving. It was terrible, like absolutely awful. He got most of his yards very end of the game. Before that, I think he was like 7 for 7 yards. It was just a brutal day if you had Tony Jones because the guy looked absolutely terrible. His offensive line wasn't giving him any help, but man, he looked rough out there. So it's kind of simple. If Alvin Kamara's out, play Mark Ingram. If Alvin Kamara's in, just kind of muddies the waters a little bit, but make sure you keep your eyes peeled for some news throughout the day. Moving on to the wide receiver position, we will start with the Dallas Cowboys first, just because the Saints guys, just an absolute mess there. I'm not really looking forward to talking about any Saints wide receivers. So I'll start with Dallas. Up top, we have CeeDee Lamb at $10,000, Amari Cooper at $8,600. Then you have Michael Gallup at $6,800. Then dropping down all the way down here, we have Noah Brown at $600. Cedric Wilson is out for this game, so he'll probably operate as a wide receiver at 4, assuming Amari Cooper happens to be in with Gallup, Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb all above him in targets. And you also have Malik Turner down there, who's had production before in absolute garbage time. I'm not really expecting that to happen here versus the New Orleans Saints. And if we're looking at the target distributions so far this season, CeeDee Lamb is the alpha dog, 7.5 targets per game, 21% target share. Amari Cooper, 7 targets per game, 20% target share. Michael Gallup, 7.5 targets per game. All you got to keep in mind, it's a little bit skewed because some of these guys have been in and out. He's also been in and out, so it's not a big sample size. So he's not going to average more targets per game than CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper. All these guys were healthy at the same time throughout the entire season. But Michael Gallup is definitely a guy that will be utilized in this offense as the wide receiver 3 and a 17% target share on this season. And Noah Brown, Cedric Wilson being out, I think he's definitely going to be in play. Amari Cooper happens to be out this game, and Noah Brown's the wide receiver 3 at only $600. You have to expect him to be the chalk cheap play on the slate. But I like all these guys a lot. CeeDee Lamb, obviously. I like these guys in the order that they're priced, to be honest, but I mean, it's pretty easy to say. But I like CeeDee Lamb a ton. New Orleans, I mean, yeah, they have a decent defense, and Marshawn Lattimore out there is definitely a very solid corner, but I'm not one to really care about cornerback versus wide receiver matchups unless it's like Marshawn Lattimore versus Mike Evans, because I'm not sure what it is, but just in his head for some reason. He just doesn't really perform that well versus him, although he did have a long touchdown earlier this season. But do like all the Dallas passing attack options, because if I like Dak, I have to like his pass catching options. And if you're going to put CeeDee Lamb in the captain spot, you got to have Dak in the flex spot. Or if you're going to put Dak at the captain spot, you got to put some of his pass catching options in the flex spot to correlate. But 13th DVA versus the pass this season, and they're 23rd versus wide receivers. Then moving on to the Saints, guys, we have just a bit of a mess. And it's really just to spin the wheel and hope one of your guys hits. And I'm probably not going to go out of my way to play any of these Saints wide receivers. It'll mainly just be whoever fits at the end of the lineup. I'll plug in one of these guys. If I'm kind of hunting down a Saints wide receiver, I'm trying to get exposure to them. But we have Marquez Callaway at $6,400, Traquan Smith at $5,600, Deontay Harris $4,600, Ty Montgomery, he's kind of like a hybrid, $3,000. Lil Jordan Humphrey, awesome name, $2,600, but just not really that fantasy relevant. Then you have Kenny Stills and Kevin White. And look at snap counts last week. All these guys put on 40% of the snaps or more, besides Kevin White, only played a couple percent of the snaps. Kenny Stills, even though he didn't get a target, he hasn't for a couple games now, he's only $200. He played 37% of the snaps last week. Then on Lil Jordan Humphrey, Deontay Harris, Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway, these guys played a decent amount of the snaps. And if you're looking at target distribution so far this season, Callaway at nearly 4.5 targets per game, Traquan Smith at 5 targets, Deontay Harris at 4.3, Lil Jordan Humphrey at 1.6, Kenny Stills at 1.78, Kevin White just... If Kevin White is in the optimal lineup today, I don't even know what to say. But all these guys are fine. I'm not going to go out of my way to play a Saints wide receiver. If they happen to fit, great. They're fine tournament plays. The Cowboys, even though they do have Javon Diggs, I mean, they do get burnt a lot by wide receivers. Like, we saw Hunter Renfrow last week on Thanksgiving. He had a fantastic game. We've seen it all season long where wide receivers are kind of toasting Dallas, despite them being 4th DVA versus the pass. They're 19th versus wide receivers, allowing close to 200 receiving yards per game to the position. So I think all these guys are fine, but I wouldn't call them elite plays. So then moving over to our lineup, like I said, I think one of these pass catching options is the most likely candidate to be in the optimal lineup tonight. We are not sure yet if Amari Cooper is going to play. It sounds like he's going to. We got the alert yesterday that he's expected to. But for me, I'm going to put CeeDee Lamb in the captain spot. I'm not sure if we can afford it at the end of the day, just with the lineup I'm having in mind here, because I'd like to get Cooper in as well. But that might just be wishful thinking. But we're going to plug CD in the captain spot. Definitely the top option on the slate when it comes to wide receivers. Leaves us $4,500 left. I would like to be able to fit in Cooper. I'm assuming he plays. He just seems a bit too cheap, which he always is on the main slate as well, and he always ends up burning me. But we're going to try to slide in both CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, but since we have Dak Prescott in a flex spot here, we'll definitely have to find some value, but maybe we could throw in a guy like Noah Brown, and we'll call it a day there. But we'll see what it looks like. Moving on to the tight ends, Dalton Schultz is obviously the best play at the position here. You just have to pay a pretty penny for him, nearly $8,000, but he has been quite involved in this offense, and with no Blake Jarwin, doesn't really have any competition for target the tight end position here, averaging close to 6 targets per game, 50 receiving yards, nearly 4.5 catches, and a 16% target share. I think he's certainly play, although I don't think his ownership is going to be too high at that price point, but he's definitely a guy that I would have some interest in. Do like Dalton Schultz in this slate. Then as far as the Saints goes, all three of these guys, Nick Vannett at $3,600, Jawan Johnson at $1,400, and Garrett Griffin, all played around 30 to 40% of the snaps last week on Thanksgiving versus the Buffalo Bills. I still think Jawan Johnson's the guy we want. He did lead the team in snaps at the position, and I just feel like he has the best pass catching upside, and he's only $1,400, and all we need is like 1 or 2 catches and hopefully one into the end zone. If that's the case, it'll be a great value play, but it's kind of more of like a spin the wheel kind of situation here. But Nick Vannett and Jawan Johnson, the two I'd prefer. Jawan Johnson at his price point, being Jawan Johnson being around half the price that Nick Vannett is, with I think somewhat similar upside. Like Vannett had the better game, but he had 1 catch. It just so happened to be a touchdown. So I'll take my chances on Jawan Johnson there. As far as defenses go, not really too interested here. If you want to play the Cowboys, just hoping Taysom Hill sucks, you can do that, but they're on the road, and I'm just not really interested in the defenses here. If they happen to get a defensive touchdown, it is what it is. I'll take the L there, but I typically feel pretty good about fading defenses, or at least being underweight on them if you don't want to do the complete fade. Kickers, I'm more inclined to play kickers. I'm usually like even to the fielder. It depends on the situation. If it's Justin Tucker, I don't mind being overweight on Justin Tucker just because we know he's going to put up points. Greg Zuerlein and Brett Maher here, I mean, they're fine. They're in a dome, so it's not like we have to worry about weather. Zuerlein, I prefer him over the Saints kicker just because I expect the Cowboys to be in scoring position more often than I would the Saints, but both these guys are fine. I always have kickers projected around the upper 7s to the low 9s in terms of fantasy points, which always makes them fine plays at this price point. They're more so low ceiling, high floor plays, so they're better suited for cash games and tournaments, which sometimes you'll see kickers very high in cash games. That's kind of the reason why, but these guys are fine, but I wouldn't captain any kickers. So then moving on to finish this lineup off, I think we could go a couple of ways here. If you wanted to punt with Noah Brown at $600, obviously it'd be better play if our guy Amari Cooper was out in the lineup that we have right now, but I still think he's going to get a decent amount of snaps with no Cedric Wilson to make him playable at $600, even if they're all healthy, meaning Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, and Amari Cooper. So if you went the Noah Brown route, you'd have $4,400 left. You could throw in a guy like the Cowboys defense or Greg Zuerlein, which is fine. You could also use the Saints kicker, Nick Fournette. Any of those options I think are certainly playable in this slate. If you wanted to go more so balanced instead of the punt option with Noah Brown, maybe like a little Jordan Humphrey here. He was in both last week. I mean, he had 5 targets, 3 catches, 7.7 fantasy points. I don't think he's a terrible play. But again, new quarterback here, so kind of hard to see how the targets are going to get distributed here. Then you have Jawan Johnson at $1,400. Like, there's a couple of ways you can go, and I wouldn't feel too bad about it. Just with this specific lineup, obviously you could switch Amari Cooper in the captain spot. Then you have CeeDee Lamb. You have some more money to play around with. But as for right now, I'll let you guys use your imagination and fill it out whichever way you want to go. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become a official member over on Patreon. Now is the best time to do so, considering we're at the very beginning of the month. I break down NBA each and every single day. Projections, optimizers, cheat sheets, whatever it may be, is probably going to be on there. And Discord community link can be found down below for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new sign over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. That'll be it. I'll stop rambling. I wish you guys the best of luck tonight. Hope you have a fantastic Thursday.